Well, hello there. This is another episode of Mudwalkers. I'm Chris. This video is brought to you by Patreon. Check out the links below to support me financially on Patreon if you believe in my message and you'd like to support me. There are different tiers you can sign up for at different costs, different, pricing? Different pricing. Check it out, super affordable. You can support me if you like. So today I have my Bible. We're going to be looking at Genesis chapter 3. For the sake of brevity, I'm not going to read the entire chapter. Instead, I would encourage you, if you're unfamiliar with the passage, go ahead and pause this and go read it, and then come back and we'll talk about it. So, let me do what I should have done at first and open it to the proper page. Here we go. So the serpent shows up in the garden, and he begins to talk to the woman Hava, or Eve. And he kind of goes right into the whole, did God really say thing? And ultimately, she ends up eating the fruit. She gets fooled. She eats from the fruit. And Adam eats from the fruit after her. And they have this epiphany. And I'm going to focus in on several key points in Genesis chapter 3 instead of the entire passage. We're going to focus in on three particular spots that are pertinent to naturism. So the first one is that Adam and Eve knew that they were naked, so they sewed fig leaves together and made themselves loincloths. That's number one. And then, so the reason why this isn't super convincing is because, against naturism, is because it's not a rule. The narrator doesn't even go out of his way to show that this is a virtuous activity on their part. He just tells us that it happened. So let's read on and find out more about the situation. Then Yahweh shows up in the garden, and they hide themselves from the presence of Yahweh. And Yahweh calls out to them, "Where are you?" Now, I've learned a lot about this passage from what's called the Bema Discipleship podcast, or Bema, B-E-M-A, Discipleship. Thanks to Will Lionheart on MeWe for pointing me to that podcast. Will, this was just solid gold. I love this podcast. And the episode on Genesis chapter 3 is by far my favorite. And so when Yahweh asks here, "Where are you?" what they say on the podcast is that this isn't sort of a, "Oh, Adam, I misplaced you. I don't know what's going on. Where'd you go?" What this kind of where is in the Hebrew is, "Hey guys, I know I left my keys right here. So what the heck? What's going on? This is supposed to be right here. Where is it?" That's the kind of where. Yahweh shows up in the garden and goes, Adam's supposed to be right here. What the heck, Adam? Where'd you go? You're supposed to be here. Where do you think you're going? You're supposed to be here. You're supposed to be here. What the heck? So Adam comes out and he says, "I heard the sound of you in the garden. I was afraid because I was naked and I hid myself." Hang on. They realize they're naked. They cover themselves with leaves. Yahweh arrives and they hide because they're naked. Something doesn't add up. They were wearing the fig leaves, but something was still wrong. So he says, "I was naked and I hid myself." And Yahweh immediately asks, "Who told you you were naked?" Now, I love what Marty Solomon says in the Bema Discipleship podcast here. Yahweh is not trying to ask a question about who told him a certain thing, as if it's a person he's talking about. Instead, what the question is focused on is, this wasn't me. So where'd you get that idea? I was afraid because I was naked. I was deficient. Something was wrong. Well, who told you that? Are you saying there's something wrong with me? That I didn't do a good job making you? Something's deficient? Are you saying I'm deficient? Who told you that? Who told you there was something wrong with this situation? You didn't get it from me. So the focus is, you're not dealing with me to get the key information in your situation. You did not come to me for guidance. Who have you been speaking with about this? I'm your teacher. I'm your guide. Who are you talking to about this? You're supposed to talk to me. So we have the first section here where they realize that they're naked, and the author doesn't tell us that this is virtuous, and then it looks like Adam still thinks he's naked despite the fact that his skin has been covered up with these leaves, and God actually doesn't even seem to mind that they are naked or that they're wearing leaves. What he's really troubled about, what God is troubled about, is the fact that they are making all these wild conclusions without consulting him, without seeking out his guidance and his wisdom. When I was a youth pastor, I would ask the youth group, I asked the youth group when we went through this passage, what was Adam and Eve's first mistake? They said, oh, eating the fruit. I said, actually, the first mistake was hearing the serpent out without going back and consulting Yahweh. They didn't go back and compare one to the other. They didn't do this in an informed way. Instead, they went immediately with what the serpent said, and they acted foolishly instead of wisely. So then we have the next place. You see, that was, so we had the one was they realized they were naked. 2 was, who told you were naked? And then we get down here to near the end of the passage. He curses the serpent, then he curses Eve, then he curses the man. Notice at no point in the curses does God apply a rule to clothing. We're going to get to that in a second. And then Yahweh God made for Adam and his wife garments of skin and clothed them. Now notice, these 3 sections, like I just said, there are no rules here. It's all narrative. Adam and Hava, if you will, Adam and Eve have some kind of epiphany about nakedness, and they try to cover themselves up with fig leaves. But then Yahweh arrives in the garden, and they realize the fig leaves did not help at all, and they are still naked. And then we end up with Yahweh coming in the second section, who told you were naked? That was the next part. And the third part, Yahweh makes them something, makes them these clothes and clothes them. At no other point in the Bible does someone receive a gift and then we expect it to be mandatory for the entire human race. It's just not stated here. However, what is stated here is in the paragraph just before the clothes, Yahweh says this: because you have heeded the voice of your wife, implicitly instead of me, because you have listened to the voice of your wife and have eaten from the tree which I commanded you not to eat from, the ground is cursed because of you. You will eat of it in pain all the days of your life. Thorns and thistles it will bring forth to you, and you will eat the plants of the field. So then, etc., we get to the clothes. So it's very interesting to me that there's no rule applied, but Yahweh says there will be these physical dangers to your skin now because of your crime. And then immediately, the very next paragraph is, God gave them leather to wear. There's hardly a better protection out there against thorns than leather. So what I see here, since there isn't a rule given, it just says that he gave them a gift. Gifts are great, it doesn't make them mandatory. But what this shows is that Yahweh has taken it upon himself to be the first example of someone clothing the naked. Now, why did people clothe the naked in the ancient world? Because there were a lot of naked people in the ancient world, and they were freezing to death. And they were exposed to thorns and thistles, and you could get infections, and you could lose limbs, or you could die. So if you were naked, you were in serious danger. Time to upgrade my memory card because my camera just ran out of space. It's a 4 gigabyte card. It was lent to me by a friend, and it's had all that it can take for one day. So what Yahweh is doing is setting an example for the rest of us of clothing the naked as a means of private charity. One person to the other, I'm taking care of your needs because you're in need and I have resources. So out of the kindness of my heart, I'm making the personal decision on my own to provide for your needs. And that's admirable. So that'll be all for this video. This episode of Mudwalkers is brought to you by the generous contributions of Naturism, Todd, Jacob, Brian, Jordan, Benjamin, Jay Sweets, and Alex on Patreon. If you haven't already signed up on my Patreon page, or if you haven't checked it out yet, there's a link down below. Go check it out. We have super affordable tiers. You can be a $5 patron or a $10 patron, and you don't have to come back every single month, every year. You can come in and out as you please. It's super affordable. If you have some extra money and you want to support the channel, please go down and subscribe to my Patreon. You'll get early access to all my videos, and you'll also get a monthly hangout with me on Zoom if you sign up for the $10 tier. And the Zoom Hangouts are an opportunity for us to come in and have a circular conversation and form a community around Mudwalkers. And I'm super excited about the Zoom Hangout this month, and I'm excited to hear from you guys. That'll be it for this video. I'll see you in the next one.